My name is Richard Kral. I'm currently working on R&D for the welder head, and I've been with Howland for about 32 years now. Well, Howland, the whole company, has changed in the last 30 years. The mobile welder has changed in the last 30 years. The job I did has changed over the last 30 years, as well as all the needs for the flash butt welding market and equipment has changed over the last 30 years. I've been involved in a lot of different things when it comes to the mobile welding side. The first thing I started working on here at Howland was the rail puller. And that was a learning experience because nobody in the whole world had done any flash butt closure welding. It takes a super puller to pull the rail so that you can make a closure weld. And we didn't know what size to make it at first. And nobody knew. We asked the railroads, and nobody really knew what size capacity you would need to stretch the rail. And we did the math, engineering-wise, and then we went and built puller. First puller we built was 40 tons. That was inadequate. And we bumped that up to 80 tons. That was inadequate. Then we said, well, how much pull will be too much? And we asked all the railroads, and they said, well, you're going to have to give yourself a safety factor of 2 to 1 so you don't tear the rail. And we worked all the numbers, and it came out to 280 tons. Well, it turned out that the 280 tons had more than enough capacity, but it was too big and wieldy to easily transport around, and it was not the right tool for a contractor. So we took a history of all the welds we made with it during the course of a full year, looked at all the passages we used to close the gap and make the welds, and that's how we settled on a 160-ton puller. I was involved in the changing out of the control systems. Our control system has come a long ways from when we first received it. Well, that was even before my time, but initially it was a mechanical drum controller. It had a drum similar to what you would find in a player piano or a music box that turned. It hit little keys that turned things on and off, and that controlled the welding process. Well, we went from that to various automated processes, and then finally one of the last ones we hit on was the IntelliWeld, which was all computer control process. Well, with that greater control, we were able to develop low consumption weld, which meant that you had to knock off fewer anchors when you were making a closure weld, and also knock them back on after you're done making the weld. And that helped to cut people out of the making of the weld. And so that was a big step up for Howland. I've been involved in looking for a thermite weld alternative, and we've come up with a couple of different pieces of equipment and different processes that have all pretty much worked, but have all had some kind of an issue that was hard to work through, either a technical issue or a cost issue. We worked with Lincoln Electric. We developed the Howlink weld. It was a butt weld, but it was made by a robot with an electric gas metal arc weld. We developed the wedge weld, which we call the Howland defect repair, or the HDR weld. And that was simply welding, flash butt welding in the top half of the rail. Defect was noted in the top half of the rail, and you wouldn't even have to cut through the rail, which gave the railroad a whole lot of benefits. So there've been a lot of things. It all depends on what the market has needed. Not called for necessarily, but needed, because the market didn't always know what it did need. But we came up with several different types of in-track welds. Without a doubt, the biggest game changer came when we had three things kind of all hit the market all at once. And we weren't planning it this way, but it worked out this way, where there was a lot of synergy between the three. And that was when we went to the IntelliWeld control system and gained a really good control of the welding process, where we're able to make very repeatable welds all the time, using up the same amount of rail all the time. And we use that to develop the low consumption weld, which allowed you to knock off fewer anchors when making a closure weld. Then we developed the puller light. And that was a puller that we can now just hang off of our welder head and bring out to the job site in our trucks. And this allowed the railroad to not have to have another prime mover to carry around our rail puller and a cart to carry hydraulics for it. And a man also goes away. And what we were able to do by combining these three things, the IntelliWeld, which let us do the low consumption weld, and the puller light, which we could carry around on the back of a mobile welder, it allowed us to drive down the cost of welding, flash welding, where it actually started to compare to thermite welding. And we had to go out and we show the railroads the cost savings. And that is when the business simply just took off. It was those three things coming together: the control system, the low consumption weld, and the puller light. Then we were starting to make mobile welders by 10 a year, where we didn't have 10 mobile welders till I was probably at Howland for 3 years already. Well, there's actually a lot of moments that stood out because the company was progressing so much and growing and doing so many things in the industry that were great as far as mobile welding goes. And a lot of moments stick out. I mean, I can remember the first time we had mobile welders working all year round. Usually for 6 months out of the year, they would be parked in the lot. I can remember when we had our first $1 million month. When I came to Howland, the entire company was making $10 million a year. But when I talk about $1 million month, that was just the mobile flash belt welding, including the fixed plant welding. We had $1 million in revenue, which would equate to a $12 million a year just for the rail welding portion of the business. We gave away a car. And that's I believe when we hit $250 million a year in business. It was always just a little celebration after celebration because we kept hitting higher and higher milestones. It was really a fun time. I think my favorite one is Unit 101. It's got a lot of history behind it. For those who don't know, Unit 101 carried the first mobile welder. Welding head, I should say, that came over from EO Patent in Kiev, Ukraine. After we got the first welder head here, and I believe it came in '69, it took us 2 years of playing around with it. This is well before my time, to actually get the process down right where we could take it out on track, and also to build a prime mover. And for that, what we used was an old Pullman rail car. And this dates back, that car dates back to the time when they used to sort mail between cities when the train was running and moving the mail. And so that was gutted, and there was a big engine put in it. It was converted to hydraulic drive, and there was a big boom and mast in the back of it, and engine ran the generator, and it was quite impressive. It was a big, lumbering, cumbersome piece of equipment that no way could be used today, but it just showed where the state of the art was back then when mobile rail welding first came to North America, and Howland was the company that did that. So that would be my favorite unit. Well, the Howland brand means going into any railroad's office and they know about Howland, and they hear about the good things we do, and they're hearing about the successes we're having and the the new products and new procedures and all the developments that Holland has done. We had the advantage of being not only the equipment user, but the equipment maker. And so every time we saw a little improvement that could have been made to one of the vehicles, we would incorporate this in the next vehicle and then go and retrofit all of our older vehicles. And so when we showed up with a piece of equipment that was going to do a job, it did a job. It did a good job. It did a great job. And the customers were always satisfied, always. So it felt good to be able to go out into a customer's office or to an ARIMA meeting or just go anywhere in the industry and tell them you were from Holland. Because they'd all say, what you guys got cooking next? Because we'd be coming out with something new.